The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Welcome back to Harrogate again, everybody. Now, so far this week we haven't really got going, have we? We've seen two really small parishes which have taken me less than half an hour apiece. We haven't really seen a proper village. Well, we're about to. Behind me there we've got the gates of a church. In there is a mausoleum related to Kirby Hall that you saw yesterday. This is Little Ouseburn. Little Ouseburn, Ouse Stream Small. Today on TVI we're in the parish of Little Ouseburn, the smaller of the two villages that share the Ouseburn name in this area. There were once three. The third was Kirby Hall, which at points in history was called Kirby Ouseburn. Little Ouseburn is a simple little village. It consists of two roads. One of them is Main Street, which forms the principal residential area, and the other is Church Lane, which runs off to the northeast towards the Grade 1 listed Holy Trinity Church. The majority of the village is set out along both sides of Main Street, running from east to west. The name of the village derives from the Ouse Beck, a small stream which acts as the dividing line between Great and Little Ouseburn, with the watercourse itself being a tributary of the River Ouse. Historically, most of the villagers who lived here were either tenant farmers or workers on the Kirby Hall estate. When the hall was demolished in the 1920s and its estate was broken up, most of the houses and land in Little Ouseburn were sold to the villagers. By far and away, the most interesting bits of Little Ouseburn are at its easternmost and westernmost extremes. In the east, you have the church, and in the churchyard is a fine mausoleum. Close by to them both is Moat Hall. That used to be part of the Kirby Hall estate and has ties to goings-on in World War II. To the west are two former pubs called the Green Tree and the Bay Horse. One of them still stands, but the other has been demolished now. The bit in the middle features a village hall and a small park, as well as loads of houses once tied to the Kirby Hall estate. Let's go walking and see it all. So this is what Little Ouseburn looked like 125 years ago. The biggest difference from then to now would be the number of houses along its main street. Essentially though, the shape and characteristics of Little Ouseburn still resemble this today. You can see how close the place is to Kirby Hall. That was important because a lot of the people who lived here were once workers on the estate. Many of the cottages shown here were lived in by tenant farmers and labourers. Now they're all privately owned, and since those days more housing has been added. As Little Ouseburn grew bigger, it expanded westwards towards what is now the B6265. That used to be the Roman road Deer Street. There hasn't been much expansion eastwards. The village church is still separated from Main Street in this top right corner. Let's get started by looking at that area to the northeast of the main village. This is the part of Little Ouseburn that's closest to Kirby Hall. This area features the church, and that's pretty much the same as is marked on the map. It remains in a rather isolated position away from the rest of civilization. Take note of the church grounds here too. You can see there's a mausoleum marked here, and that's still there now. It was an important landmark for the Thompson family of Kirby Hall. South of them both is Moat Hall, another building that has quite a storied history. Virtually none of this has altered since 1900, so let's go and have a look at it. Dedicated to Holy Trinity, the church is separated from the main village by a meadow with a pair of footpaths that cross it. This one is within the Deanery of Ripon, the Archdeaconry of Richmond and the Diocese of Leeds. Its benefice is united with 5 other local churches. Although away from the rest of Little Ouseburn, its site is considered attractive, positioned on an angle of the road among some trees. It's a simple church consisting of a nave, 2 aisles, a chancel and an unbuttressed tower. There's also a porch, which is the latest addition added to the building in the 19th century. The whole thing is built of a mixture of sandstone and limestone, and there's even some reused Roman stones in the tower, evident by their large size. The tower and the chancel date from the 11th century, whilst the south aisle, the arcades and the chancel arch are from the 14th. The battlements and pinnacles on the tower are from the 15th century. In 1874 and 75, the north aisle was rebuilt to provide an organ chamber and a vestry, and the east window was altered at the same time. The architects were Paley and Austin. To the southwest of the church is the Thompson Mausoleum, dating from the middle of the 18th century. It was built for Henry Thompson of Kirby Hall, who died in 1760. We have met a similar mausoleum on our travels through the East Riding. Many of you will likely remember the Halsham episode and the resemblance this bears to the Constable Mausoleum. This one is constructed in sandstone ashlar and has a lead roof. It consists of a rotunda surrounded by a Greek Doric colonnade. That has a triglyph frieze and cornice, and the whole thing is surmounted by a drum with a domed roof. The mausoleum is a Grade II listed building. The style of the mausoleum is that of a baseless Roman Doric temple, meaning it has no plinth or base and instead is grounded into the earth. There has been much debate about the exact date of the building and who designed and built it, but thanks to university researchers at Kiel and Hull, we do have an idea. Permission was granted by the church commissioners to build the mausoleum in 1742, but nobody knows for sure when the first stone would have been laid. However, that date rules out John Carr as its architect. He would have only been 19 at the time and yet to explode onto the architectural scene. Colonel James Moyser of Beverley supplied its plan initially. He was a known friend of Henry Thompson. Moyser's ideas were much altered by Thompson, and so he eventually withdrew his involvement. So who did eventually design this? Lord Burlington of Lonsborough was ideally placed to offer support, but by the 1740s he was no longer a practicing architect. In all likelihood then, it was Roger Morris, a friend of both Moyser and Lord Burlington. Morris was also involved in the design for Kirby Hall for Sir Stephen Thompson, as we learned yesterday. Over 160 years, members of the Thompson family were interred in the crypt below the main chamber. When the vaults filled up, burials were then moved to the graveyard behind. By 1910, the Thompson family had vacated Kirby Hall, but the mausoleum stands as a reminder to the days when they held all the power around here. It's a little bit lucky that this still stands, actually. In 1945, when a Canadian Air Force Halifax bomber crashed nearby, exploding its payload of bombs, it damaged both the church and the mausoleum. By 1993, the mausoleum was in a perilous state, but it was saved thanks to huge local interest, the work of York architect Peter Pace, and some support from English Heritage and the National Lottery Fund. A partnership with the York Conservation Trust was later established, and since 2009, they've looked after the building. Moat Hall sits to the south of the church. The exact origins of Moat Hall are not known, however it is believed it sits on the site of a much older property that could possibly have been moated. That would explain its name, but nobody has ever worked out if that's the case, despite the fact that the North Yorkshire and Cleveland Vernacular Building Study Group have researched this property. They found evidence of a substantial medieval timber frame manor house, the earliest part of which was late 15th or early 16th century. It still survives as a central part of the hall today. Moat Hall was at one time under the ownership of the Kirby estate. They added its current grand staircase and remodelled its facade, creating a typically symmetrical Georgian elevation. During World War II, it was used as a hostel for Land Army girls. The hall and the land between it and the church were bombed at that time, thought to be an overrun of a bombing sortie on RAF Linton-on-Ouse. Okay, so it's about a quarter of a mile, or maybe less than that, from here to get into Little Ouseburn village itself. You can walk it from the footpath from the church and do it that way, but I'm going to drive it. We're going to drive towards the village hall and start there, and then we'll just take a gentle stroll down the main street in Little Ouseburn. Let's go. So now we're going for our main walk, which is essentially a trip down the main street from east to west. Starting in the east, this is where most of Little Ouseburn's population once lived. 90% of its houses were situated between the vicarage and the infant school, fronting Main Street. Note there's also a back lane, which would have allowed the residents rear access. Let's first of all have a look at that infant school, which still stands. Today it's Little Ouseburn Village Hall. As far as I can tell, and information was a bit thin on the ground for this is the only school Little Ouseburn has ever had to its name. I wasn't able to pin down when it was closed, but it's good to see that the old school has found another vital community use. As a village hall, it offers 2 reception rooms, one large and one small, although the smaller of the 2 can be opened out to create a larger space with a capacity for 80 people. It has a well-equipped kitchen suitable for serving meals prepared off-site. Hirers of this building can also make use of its readily available equipment, like tables and chairs. So the rest of the village is overwhelmingly residential, and to be fair, it's been that way for a long time. This is where a lot of workers on the former Kirby Hall estate once lived. When the estate was broken up in 1920, all the land that it owned in Little Ouseburn was sold off, as were several buildings. Some of those are now privately owned. The current population is just under 300, a pretty significant figure for a village of its size. This is by no means the biggest it's ever been. Little Ouseburn was once not very little at all. In 1840, the population stood at around 600. That's more than double what we have now. However, in the 40 years between then and 1880, there was a huge drop, dwindling down to 250. Normally, figures like that tell a story, such as a tragedy or a natural disaster maybe. In this case, they're a little misleading. Nothing really happened. The cause of the drop was due to a boundary change. Since then, the number of houses here has actually increased. Since 1920, every single house in the village has been occupied. There are currently 110 households in Little Ouseburn. Industrially, agriculture has always been the primary occupation for the people here. In the 1830s, 3/4 of the population were employed within that sector. This was reflected by the social status of the people living in Little Ouseburn at that time, half of them identified as labourers. Overwhelmingly, most of them were men. Women would have taken on more traditional domestic chores. There was very little else the population was involved in. Fast forward to 2001, where the census data showed that the modern Little Ouseburn inhabitant is more likely to be involved in manufacturing or retail. Very few people now work in agriculture. Amenities and facilities are a little thin on the ground in Little Ouseburn. Mind you, about 3/4 of the way down the street there is a small park. It's well hidden because you have to walk up this little path to get to it, but it's worth a look. It might not be the biggest playground you ever did see, but it does its job for the local children very nicely, thank you very much. Aside from this park, the church and the village hall, Little Ouseburn doesn't have any other essential facilities. There's no shop here, nor is there a post office anymore. We already know there's no school either. Yeah, it's a nice village, isn't it, Little Ouseburn? And it's quite peaceful this morning too, so for the most part I've had this place all to myself. Just a few cars coming past here and there. That's really all I've seen. Nobody's been walking around. All I can hear really is the sound of the birds in the trees, which is rather beautiful. So between here and the end of the road it's just more housing, as you can see. Typical Yorkshire style, I suppose. Yorkshire style housing. I suppose you could call it that. I don't know, is that even a thing? Is Yorkshire style a thing? I don't know, I've no idea. Anyway, we aren't far away from the end of this road. When we hit the end of the road, there are 2 pubs to discuss. Now we have the western end of the village to consider, much more sparsely populated than the east, although these days newer housing has joined the 2 areas up. The road that runs to the west of the village is the route of the former Roman road, Deer Street. It would become the B6265 as it is today. In 1900 there were 2 pubs on that road, namely the Green Tree and the Bay Horse. Neither of them are there now, as we're about to see. So let's have a look at what's become of those 2 pubs. First of all, the old Bay Horse. This has been turned into a house. I couldn't find much about this one, save for the fact that when it was in business, it was tied to Hepworth's Brewery. As for the Green Tree, that's also no longer trading, but unlike the Bay Horse, the building it occupied has been knocked down. Sitting in its place now is this brand new house, which has only been here since 2022. The pub closed 3 years earlier in 2019. As a roadside pub, it's perhaps unsurprising that it had quite a long life, but in its later years, its opening times were erratic as part of the building was to be converted into housing. Well, I think we can safely say that now it's housing, can't we? With the demolition of the Green Tree, Little Ouseburn was left without a pub for the first time in more than a century. Okay, so with one Ouseburn down, we have one more to check out. Tomorrow we'll do just that. Join me just up the road as we take on Little Ouseburn's bigger brother. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.